All right, knowing when it's time to start anew. It's a hot topic. I know for a lot of my friends it is. I know it's for my family that it is, and it probably applies to you too. How do you make that distinction when it's time to upgrade your situation, when it's time to just move on to, what you perceive to be greener pastures? It's a method, it's a process, and this is very, very simple. But before I begin, I do want to point out that when I make coaching recommendations or coaching processes, I don't umbrella the covenant of marriage in there, because I do believe, this is my belief, that when it comes to marriage and vows and that whole entire thing, that it's not always that cut and dry to do this stuff and then move on. So there's principles which will apply to like reconciliation of a relationship or something like that, but more so than not, this is straight up application for stuff outside the covenant of marriage. All right, so cool. It's like off my conscience now. All right, so how do you know when it's time to move on? And these are the three things that makes it very, very simple for you to make that decision. And again, it's always making decisions from a place of power and peace rather than thinking that you don't have any other options. So there's three. The first thing is recognizing and truly embracing the fact that you're 100% in the driver's seat. For everything that you do, you always have a choice. And here's what I want you to listen to before you start throwing, a bunch of objections at, is that it's not whether or not you have a choice. You always have choices to stay, to leave, whatever you're doing. It's making a choice that maybe you don't want the consequences of taking a different choice from or for, whatever the grammar is. So recognizing that even if you decide to stay on one path, that's still a choice. You may have, a family that you have to take care of. If we're talking about, whether or not to leave a job, when you're there and it's not, it doesn't feel right, or you're not happy there or whatever, like you have choices there. I can stay and just accept things as they are. I can try to change things, or I can move on. All right, well, fine. But if I move on, I have a family to support. That's still a choice for you making the choice to remain there. You may not like the consequences, right, of taking a different direction. Now I have to worry about how am I going to provide for them, and your brain goes on like this ridiculous tangent, and it's completely unnecessary. So here's what I'm going to take you through the process here. That number one, you're always in the driver's seat when it comes to making a choice. Choice A, choice B, choice C. Right? But within that, when you're trying to do like my risk benefits, with the pros and cons, all these things, is the next thing. You have to have very clearly defined goals, because that many times will also help you to make the decision, because clarity of goals determines order of priorities. Yeah, you know what, maybe this job right now is not where I want to see myself, and I have a family to support. My goal, excuse me while I reposition myself here, my goal is to support my family, and I need this amount of money in order to do that. So can I look somewhere else in order to do that? Yes or no? Like, you do your own risk analysis and how you play that out. But you're always the driver, and you have to have clearly defined goals, because then that determines the order of priorities. The final thing is making sure that you're always operating on a timeline. Right? And the purpose of a timeline is not to give you a backdoor escape. Oh, I'll just stay here and see if after 3 months it doesn't get any better, then I'm going to leave. That's not where the line in the sand is. The line in the sand is at the 3 month mark, or the 3 year, 30 year, whatever. I'm making a decision where I'm going to go, if that makes sense. It only holds you for accountability purposes. It doesn't give you let me just stay on the fence and see if it gets a little bit better. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up in the fact that, number one, you don't think that you have any choices. You do. Number two, the distinction between having a choice and then dealing with the consequences of said choice. All right. And then making sure that I'm very clear about my goals. And then finally, the fact that I'm operating on a timeline. If my priority is to provide for my family, my priority is to compete in a figure competition, my priority is to funnel all my money towards starting a business, right? Now your priorities are clearly outlined. and you operate within a timeline, but in all of that stuff, you're still primarily in the driver's seat. So it's repositioning yourself and recognizing and embracing the joy of the fact that you are 100% in charge of where you decide to drive the vehicle of your life. How's that? All right, have a good weekend.